All right. Good evening. I am Thrahg Bjornson. I'm Paragon Scout with Goldenvale. I've been a Paragon now for about a year and a half. I've been playing Scout for about half of my Amtgard career, which goes back about 6 years. Um, I don't really know what else to say about my intro, other than I guess I'm more known for using a bow than with my martial abilities, but I do have a deep passion for the class. It's practically all I play, although recently I've been trying to dabble outwards of it. So I guess we'll just get started with questions. The first one came from Soren via text, and I'll read these out for people who are listening on. Soren asks, Scout has always been my favorite class that I'm horrible at. Where do you suggest new players to start to the class start? So that's an interesting question specifically for because scouts are considered by many, and I definitely consider it to be one of the most versatile class in the game. So when a newer player comes to me and they're starting out with the class and trying to learn the game using scout as their lens, I say pick what you're strongest at and find a way pick what you're strongest at and find a way to fit that into your scout class. So the best example I can give for that is I'm very good with a bow. The first couple years that I played Amtgard, I was an archer. I got up to level like 5, and I was very good with a bow, and that's what I focused on. But when I went to scout, because I liked the class better than I liked archer, I hung on to the bow and I hung on to that martial aspect of it, and I used all of the abilities of the scout around my bow and adapted the class to that. My apprentice Jace is a decent archer, but he's better with fighting. And I've noticed that he has a different style, which is taking the abilities of the scout and adapting it around his ability to swing a sword. So, what I would say to you, Soren, is figure out what you're good at or decide what you feel like you're the best at in the game on the field. And with the adaptability of the scout, you can really fine tune or really support what you feel you're good at and just enhance it. And I will do better. I have a habit of letting off my mic button, so I'll try to do better of not cut. So the next question came from Weaver. What what do I think is a scout's strongest ability? Followed closely by Jace's answer, and why is it adaptive blessing? I'm not actually sure that adaptive blessing is the scout's strongest ability. I don't mean to disagree with Jace. Um, I'm not actually sure. I mean, adaptive blessing is a very powerful ability, and I know that a lot of people look at Amtgard classes as the sixth ability being the most powerful one. But I think that the question as a whole is really difficult when it comes to scouts because depending on how you're playing really determines what your most powerful ability is. If you're running as a skirmisher, if you're sitting on the edges of a battlefield and picking your targets, things like tracking or heal are going to be really good. If you're stuck on the front line and you're facing down a druid that you don't necessarily want to fight, then dispel magic is going to be probably your best ability at that moment. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish or what style of scout. I guess if I absolutely had to pick one, I guess I would say adaptive blessing just because it's it's the most adaptable, it's the most useful in all those situations. But I wouldn't say it's my favorite. Is this any better for cutting in and out? Cool. All right. Reading up through. So 100% not heavy thrown. Got it. Is that your way of saying, Soren, that you're not good with the heavy thrown? Ah. Fun fact. Uh, I very, very rarely carry a heavy thrown with me. Though when I do, I'm usually pretty effective with it. It's one of those forgotten things for me. Though I know other scouts that use it very prolifically. What's my favorite scout ability? I guess I'd have to go with the one I use the most, which is Shadow Step, which I know is kind of a benign one for scout, but it's definitely an ability that allows me to change gears very well. If someone's barreling down on me and I have my bow out, it allows me to get to my swords and come out swinging. I had a dream of using a shield and a heavy thrown as a scout, but then I realized I can't hit people 10 feet in front of me. So, something I learned a long time ago about heavy thrown weapons is something I learned a while ago about heavy thrown weapons because I'm much the same. Unless it's built very, very well, I'm completely inaccurate with. So, I kind of don't even throw them at people anymore. I just kind of toss them. I used to keep when I do carry, I carry one like just tucked in my belt or tucked in like an ankle sheath, and I really just like pull and toss in one motion and just underhanded toss it at someone. It doesn't have to have speed, and they don't have to be close by in order to be really effective with it. Good evening, Sir Anders. Just so you know, Anders, your mic is cutting in and out.
I'm trying to figure out how to turn it off.
Turn off the mic completely. There you go. You got it. Getting back to what you were talking about, Soren, having a shield is actually a really good way to conceal a throwy because you can hold it in your sword in your shield hand and tuck your sword and then toss. But if you're worried about your accuracy at distances, then I wouldn't use it over distance. Just use it close. It's because no one's talking. I was waiting to see if someone else had a question. What's been one of your biggest challenges as a scout? Coming from Jace. I, honestly, I'd have to say showing people that the class is not useless. It's been my experience, at least a lot more. If you go back beyond a year, that a lot of people didn't think about scouts as a good class. They kind of just thought of scouts as a catch-all, as opposed to something that's actually like really effective on a battlefield. So, and I don't think that I was the one that turned heads on this, but it's definitely gotten a lot more light in the last year, and I think it's because of new paragons like um, Ben Claudio and some of our other like up and coming scouts like Mac and other people just doing better and showing off the. So, talk about how to use each scout ability effectively. Okay, so if we're gonna break down the class of scout, I don't necessarily start at the abilities, but we can definitely go through and break. So every class starts with what you can and cannot bring on the field. And with scouts, it kind of becomes a little more important because you have choices to make as far as what kind of engagement you want to have. Fighter, the point of being a fighter is frontline. The point of being a barbarian is being a rage monster. The point of being an archer is you're shooting arrows. And the point of being an assassin is that you're quick and nimble and need to sneak. Scouts have a bit more option in front of them. So you have to choose, do I want to be able to engage front line and bring a shield and wear as much armor as I can? Do I want to be quick and agile and stay on the outskirts with a bow and engage at range? Do I want to be as prepared as possible and come out with a bow slung over my back and a shield in my hand? All of these things, and that last one is something that a lot of people don't think about when they run scout, is that they can do stuff like that. So deciding and figuring out how you want to build your is almost as important to a scout as how you want to build your spell list if you're a caster class, and it can very well shape your impact on the battlefield. In a more general sense, related to adaptive blessing, how is resistant defined? Are you asking about how the mechanics work? Okay, so resistant means that the first um, source of that damage, or the first source of interaction from a spell of the school that you're protected by, is resisted. It doesn't affect you, and then the blessing wears off. So if I take adaptive blessing command and a warrior tries to um, taunt me, or I command thy attention, Sirrah, I will ignore the first instance of him doing that because I have adaptive blessing command, and it'll go forward for any of the other schools of magic. So while we're on the subject of adaptive blessing, I understand why Mac loves it. It's definitely a very difficult spell to master. It definitely gives you like a leg up, but then if you get really good with it, it can change how everyone else around you looks at you and interacts with you. So a good scout will put adaptive blessing onto them at every level. A great scout is going to know when to put adaptive blessing on that's not at the beginning of a match. So or at the beginning of a combat round or at the beginning of a life. Generally speaking, when used correctly, adaptive blessing is done after observing the field. So something that Jace and I work on and something I think he does a little bit better than me at times, to be completely honest, is he will watch the field and watch what kind of spells, say, a bard is using. Well, that's a push bard. He's doing nothing but push it. That's all he's got. So when I go after him, that's what I need to be immune to. We'll immunize ourselves to it, or we'll resist ourselves to it, and then go after that bard, and then we can resist his first spell and use that time while he's trying to recoil and recast to close the rest of the distance and take him out. Same can be said same can be done with any other class. But the key is to wait until your enemy engages and you see what kind of spells they're working with. What would you change about Scout if you could? I'm gonna have to think about that. Flame Blade once per life. That's funny. I would actually give them more recharges. The fact that only 2 of their abilities has a charge, but all of the rest of their abilities are once per life or once per refreshes. Sorry, I cut out there. Once per life or once per refreshes. I'd give more of their abilities the chance to recharge. Such specifically Shadow Step. Being able to only use that once is kind of a hard gimp for me. Usefulness of EX ability is OP. I think that's what gives the Scout its strength. Is if you give a class a bunch of once per life abilities, and that's all they can do. I've got 8 or 9 spells that I can use, and I'm done until I die. Giving them EX is kind of important for them to maintain their power when they're so limited. So moving on down the list of abilities, well, someone else is going to ask another. We'll go down to Hold Person. Hold Person is admittedly the spell that I'm probably the most guilty of not using. I don't use it nearly as much as I should, but it does have a lot of use. One of the big design points for Scout, I guess you could call. I guess the purpose of it is hunting, picking a target, locking in on that target, and focusing it until it's dead. And a lot of Scout abilities are built around being able to stalk and kill a single target. So adaptive blessing gives you an ability to stop their counterattack at you. Hold Person does something like keeps them from running away, and then you've got further up the tree Dispel Magic, which will strip them of all their enchantments so that you can easier kill them. So hold person has that use. It also has a pretty good defensive use if you're sorry, I was reading something. Um, hold person is good defensively if you're using a bow, for example, and someone's moving up on you. Next question from somebody is, if you could, what would you add to the scout class? What would you I don't know what I would take away, but I would probably want to give them a specialty. Just one. Just, give me a destruction arrow or a poison arrow. That'd be really nice. The biggest weakness is a bow scout, and this goes to assassins as well. The biggest weakness of running a bow when you don't have archer tools is not being able to destroy shields and armor. So I'd like to have that as a scout, though admittedly that's gonna make me kind of overpowered. So the arrows are crushing breaking it, but it's not the same as a destruction, and it's really important to understand when you're out with a bow, you're limited in your targets. If someone comes out and they've got 4 points of armor, it's going to take 3 arrows to kill that person. If they have any armor, it's going to take 2 arrows minimum to kill them. And most archers won't knock multiple arrows to their bow. Pinning arrow, if all I got was that, I'd be happy with it. I could replace hold person with a pinning arrow, or give the option to choose one. Choose one hold arrow once per life or pinning arrow. I could make that compromise. Um anyways, back to the armor conversation. So a big thing when it comes to archery and being on a field is once somebody has you in their sight, there aren't many archers who can knock an arrow fast enough to let off more than a round if someone's charging at you. Which means if I have to engage somebody in full armor, and I was just doing this actually, and I guess I'm just gonna talk about Jace a lot tonight. I was just doing this the other day at Evan Falls with Jace. He had armor and was basically engaging my entire team, and I had to be able to take him down very quickly and efficiently. And basically, the only way I could do that was mounting multiple arrows to my bow. I think I mounted 3 and fired them all at his chest so that I knew that at least 2 would hit and he died. And while that worked, that was good. But if I didn't do that, if I didn't have 3 arrows available, or if I, you know, missed, as soon as I let off 1 arrow and he realized that I was on the field and looking at him, he was turning and coming after me. Being a bow user makes you a target, especially in small. What's up, Zero? Or any other questions? No. Okay. Zero's talking in Druid chat. Get out of it. Arrow construction. This is a really controversial topic. Um, there are some really, yeah. Buy Long Dog. That's a plug, but basically my knight and myself, we build and sell arrows through Long Dog merchants. Um, there are a few different ways to build an arrow that is safe, and there are arguments about exactly what methods are the best. Um, Mirren and I's, if there was a top 10 conversation, greatest hits of conversations Mirren and I have had, it's about arrow construction and what the safest way to make them is. But most specifically, when you build an arrow, the best way to construct it is what's going to be safe. And something I've kind of adapted recently, based on what's popped up on the Kingdom page recently, is if you can't trust your arrow being handed to somebody else with a bigger, stronger bow, unless obviously you're already at max weight, but unless you feel like you can hand someone else your arrow and have them abuse it and use it, don't bring it on the field. Doesn't mean you have to share, but it has to be good enough that you would feel comfortable someone else shooting you with it. And if you're not there, if you're not 100% there, don't bring it onto the, because ultimately safety is the most important thing with arrow construction. That being said, preferences, though, that's the non-controversial, that's the you know everyone agrees on that point, or everyone should agree on that point. That being said, I like sleeker, longer arrows that fly further. So that's why I use gamma arrows. Get out of here, Jay. That's why I like long dog arrows. That's why I build gamma arrows, is they have a longer, sleeker design, and they have a good weight on the head. Um, I recommend building arrows for max pull, regardless of how long the pull is of your bow. If your bow, you definitely want to put stoppers or put like a piece of electrical tape on your arrow so that you know where your max draw is if your bow isn't a 28-inch draw. But I like using the longer arrows because when you do put them behind a stronger bow, then you get a bit more range out of it. Flu arrow shafts. What is that? Or what do you mean by that? Do you mean like feathers and veins, or do you mean like big? Oh, that. No, no. I've never fired them before, so I don't know how they behave. They look like they create a lot of drag, though, which you're already getting enough of that from the head of the arrow, so I probably wouldn't use it just off of looking at it, but I'd have to give it a try to give you a good opinion of it. I'd imagine they are really accurate. If you have a lot of drag at the back of an arrow, it's going to keep that point firmly facing. But again, I haven't fired them, so I don't know how they. Can't really give a strong opinion on. So moving up the list of abilities, we come to. I guess I'd call it the single most empowering thing that a scout has. It is when you're on a team with other casters, and that is evolution. Evolution allows you to take an extra enchantment just innately. So it allows you to take an enchantment and then use adaptive blessing, or it allows you to take two enchantments from other classes. You know, protection from projectiles and lycanthropy, for example. Now there are much better, Whoa, hold on. There are much better examples, but it's it's definitely what allows scouts to adapt very well. Hold on one second. I think my favorite combination, and every scout has their favorite combination for their every single one. And if they don't yet, they're not Paragon material. Mac, um, but mine is probably Iron Skin and Flame, and that's a lot of fun. Or Gift of Fire. Gift of Fire is pretty good along with Iron Skin. Golem Flame Blade is also a very good choice. I remember having Troll's Blood Iron Skin before as a bow scout, and that was a lot of fun. Void Touch. I don't like Minion. I don't like Minion because it robs me of all my abilities. If I was just a silly barbarian, then that'd be fine. Although barbarians can't take enchantment. So the next ability up the list is Dispel Magic, which is, Dispel Magic is pretty self-explanatory. You have armor, you have magical ancestral armor. I don't want you to have magical ancestral armor. I'm going to take it away from you. That's, no, we can't. Go away. That's this is a Q&A. We're not trying to figure out how to break the class. That's funny. Void Touch and Silver Tongue is a very good combination right there. But Dispel Magic, it's pretty straightforward. You have a thing. I don't want you to have the thing. I take away the thing. I will use the opportunity to say that one of the big things I use Dispel Magic for isn't actually to cast it at people, but to make them go away. Because when you have a druid approaching you that's fully laden down with enchantment and you start dispelling them, they're going to turn and run pretty quick. So, and you can do this with a lot of other abilities too, but it works best with the spell because it's this big, bad, scary ability to a lot of really enchanted casters. So, always something to keep in mind when you're casting. Next thing up is Shadow Step. Shadow Step's really nice. Step in sub and just kind of wait a little while until everyone forgets you exist, and then you can come out behind their lines and kill them all, as long as they don't, track you or something like that. I usually use it defensively. Um, why is it doing? I'd say that one of my favorite ways of using Shadow Step is another one of those means to close the distance. Basically, everything I do as a scout is to get me closer to my enemy. So when I'm running at you, you'll get a spell off, and I'll have Adaptive Blessing on. Or I'm running at you, and I'm not protected against your spells, so I will Shadow Step, which interrupts your casting. And if you do it right, they're going to start casting something else to interact with you while you're inside. And then you can either just return to the physical world, or you can track yourself out of it, which instantly takes you out and allows you to proceed forward again, which a lot of players don't realize you can do faster that way, and they don't expect you to pull off a maneuver. So you're charging at somebody, and they start casting a Seven of Shadows, and you come to a stop. Say your name, tracking, 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 and charge forward again. Most of the time, especially if you've got good legs under you, you're going to close whatever distance between you and the caster is. That last 15, 20 feet. So you have release. Release is pretty good. Release is one of the abilities that they have that's has a charge, so you can actually reach. Why do you need to say your name? Your target is yourself, because you need to declare a target, even if your target is yourself. It's not a touch spell. Uh, so the two responses I just got was, wait, why do you need to say your name? Your target is yourself. I'm pretty sure you don't. If you don't declare a target, it targets yourself. So I'm not sure where that lands in the rules or clarifications. If you find, definitely show me. Um, but as my understanding of it has always been, you have to declare a target for a spell or it fizzles. I think Zero, you're thinking of touch spells, but I might be wrong. So Jace is check. In the meantime, I guess I'll keep moving up the list to release. There's really not much to go over with release. Like I was saying before, take people out of frozen. You take people out of being stuck. This is, the second level is about helping your teammates. Realistically, um, it's definitely valuable to free yourself from like entangles and but release more often than not, vastly more often than not, I'm using on an ally. Heal is about 50-50. I'll heal myself or I'll heal an ally. Um, heal is pretty good as extraordinary, though, with the, I like it. And then you get up to the top, which is your first level ability, which are two of the most important aspects of the scout, is what you get right at the front end. First is tracking, which takes yourself out of insub, but it also lets you snap multiple classes out of their oh shit button. Um, assassins especially, it's the anti-assassin. I'm glad that it's one of the abilities you get to chart. I'm glad that it's ambulant. I'm glad that you get two of them right off the bat. It's a really, really effective ability for pulling people out of insub. It's also really effective for friends, for allies. If they've been committed lost, if they've been sent in sub against their will, you can track them out and find them and pull them back into the fight. It can be used as a release of sorts in that way. Now, the other ability at level 1, and I know it's not technically an ability, but it is the second line of that, which may use a bow so long as a shield is not carried. That is a really confusing line for a lot of people, and it's caused controversy in the past. It's definitely gotten me some weird looks. But what has been clarified and what is the case is, if you're not holding a shield, you can fire your bow. But you can use a shield while you have a bow on your person. So a lot of the times when I don't know what kind of fight I'm going in, or if I'm going onto a big open field, I will bring a shield with me. I'll bring a little punch, and I'll have my sword, and I'll usually have my sword sheathed, or clipped onto my frog, on my bell frog, so that I can quickly pick what I want to do. But you can bring your shield out and keep your bow slung on your back, or shield in right hand, bow in left hand, but you can't fire your bow while your shield's there. But a lot of times I'll just walk out on the field with an arrow knocked in my left hand, ready to go. I have my shield in my right. I'll deflect arrows, I'll stop, whatever, and then I'll just drop the shield and I can start shooting. Or drop the shield, shoot an arrow, pick my shield back up, and keep moving forward. And it's the biggest aspect of Scout to me that gives it its versatility. Mac is typing. We might have an answer. You need Mac, isn't that saying that you do need to declare a target? You need to declare a target for spells with range of 20 feet or further. Tracking has a range of 20 feet. Or does it say in the post that self doesn't? Okay. Hmm. That's a good question, Zero. I mean, charge 3 or charge 5, once you get the incant down, it doesn't really make a difference. I don't know if I don't know if it will make the class too powerful, but I do think that it doesn't really fit in with what they're trying to do with the class. Do you think are you suggesting that to make? Okay, I understand what you're saying. Um, Magic and ability. Okay, that's the key word there. Magic and abilities used at a range greater than touch require the target to be indicated by name. That makes more sense. So no, I don't have to target myself to track. It does definitely help battlefield clarification though. And as long as you don't have 30 syllables in your name, it's not that much to add to it. I'd very much recommend. So getting back to greater release versus release, I don't know if it's definitely not a hill I would die on, Zero. I think it's I haven't really come across many times as a scout where I wish I had greater release and I only. But maybe that's me. Maybe that's my experience. Tracking is amazing. Tracking is very very nice. What sort of things would you recommend to someone wanting to get into scout? Do it because you'll never want to play another class again. Um, what would I recommend? I guess I'd recommend. It's a similar answer to Soren's question from earlier. Um, find the thing that you're best at already in Amtgard. If you're a brand new player, obviously that's it's kind of a different answer. But if you're an experienced player getting into Scout, find what you're best at in Amtgard, or decide what you're best at in Amtgard, and adapt the class to fit that. Scouts can do everything. So in the case of Murin, who just said, I started Scout and I'm at level 3, but I've never really found my niche. I'm very interested in that question. So Murin's a very good archer. Paragon, some would say. Um, so Mirren's a very good archer. She's very good with a bow. So Mirren's arc with a scout would be very similar to my own, which is Start with your bow and figure out how the class works with that bow to make it better. You've lost your specialty arrows, but what have you gained? You've gained backup weapons, you've gained the ability to engage in physical combat if someone gets too close. You've gained outs to get away from people when they're charging down on you. You've gained ways to heal yourself, to get yourself back into the fight after you escape. An enchantment slot, which I did go over earlier, Zero. I don't think you're either not here or away from your mic for that. But we went over a few different combinations. But I would say to an experienced player, figure out what you do best and do what scouts do best. Adapt the class to what you're trying to do, to your play style. That being said, to a newer player, I would recommend Scout to any newer player because Scout basically allows you to do whatever you want. Scout, as a master of scouting, you can conquer any class, but as a starter going into Scout, as a new Amtgarder going into Scout, you can use it as a launch pad into any class. Well, I want to be a healer. All right, so you've been Scout for a little while. What do you like doing the best? I like supporting my team. I go around releasing people. I heal people. I go around, blessing people and protecting them. Well, you can't do that, but I go around. I go around helping my teammate and keeping them safe. Okay, well, maybe you should consider looking into healer as your next class, and that kind of tells you where you want to go forward from there. I really like a bow. I'm a scout, and I really enjoy the bow. Well, you should give archer a go, or you should give assassin a go, depending on which side of I really like combat. I like armoring up and just getting in people's faces. All right, give barbar a chance. Give fighter a chance. You can really branch this class out into any of the other classes. Everything. I've been trying to get away from bow using in other classes just because I want to break the stigma that I only know how to archery. What do you recommend for a path without what do you feel that you're best at without your bow, Murin? Not sword. Okay. Why not? Or do you want to see yourself improve with the sword? I want to get better with a sword, but rarely have opportunity to fight, so I'm trying to figure out other nuance. No, it's fine. I don't mind reading the questions out and the responses. Some people would tell you that I like to hear my own, which I kind of do. I wasn't sure if scout is just sword and bow. Heavy thrown, yeah. I mean, haha. Scout, I mean, martial classes. That's what they come down to. Ultimately, it's. I'm trying to think of an answer that's not just based around sword and bow, but that's what martial classes are. If you're trying to get out of that completely, the scout's still going to be difficult for you because you can't just cast with a scout. But what you can do with a scout, if you don't want to use your bow, is act as a skirmisher. Jason and I have had several conversations, more recently actually, about scout versus fighter, scout versus barbarian, just comparing the different classes and what their place is on the battlefield. And one thing that him and I agree on is that scouts are not frontline fighters. So scouts are not designed to be always in your face. They're skirmishers. They sit on the flanks, they pick a target, and they move in. A good scout with a sword isn't necessarily just running down targets and killing, which means that you don't have to be super good with a sword. Catching a really good fighter off guard and getting them on the defensive quickly is a really good way of killing someone who you feel is otherwise much better than you with sword and board. So the example I give, I'll go back to Jace, which is Jace is a better fighter than me, hands down, especially now because I'm super rusty. I haven't been fighting that much, and basically I have to make myself invisible to him if I want to kill him. I have to make it so that he's not focused on me. I have to wait till he's focused on one of my teammates, and then I will run in and then I'll run in and fuck him up before he can really react to me because he's still kind of focused on somebody else. And you can kind of do that a lot. So Zero's just said, I'm surprised to hear that. I see a full enchanted scout with two sticks coming at me. I get very scared. Enchantments change the dynamic of any battlefield. You can definitely turn a scout into a frontline fighter with proper enchantment. Um, like we were talking about earlier, um, Gift of Fire / Flame Blade and Iron Skin definitely turns a scout into a hardcore, fighter. That being said, would I still rely on them as a frontline? Not necessarily. You still only have a small shield, or you're still only flow, and there are still plenty of ways to stop you. Zero, realistically, and I know where you're coming from with this as a bard. How many scouts make it to you when that happens? You, Zero. Well, just about me and dashing. So I guess my follow up to that is, and I guess this is just to pick what you said, and I see a full enchanted scout with two sticks coming at me. I get very. Someday when I learn to use a sword, y'all are done. So when you've seen dashing and myself running at you, Zero, is it after you've been focusing on us, or is that after you've been looking at something else and you turn and you see us coming at you? Generally, I'm scanning the field. I wouldn't say that I get caught off guard, but I'm not entirely. That's fair. I mean, that's fair, and that's part of why you're a paragon. But I'd say as a generalization, when you have a scout that's hammed up like that, he will tend to stay more towards the front of the fight, but a good scout's always looking for attacks of opportunity. They're not trying to make themselves the center of attention like a, painted face barbarian or a steel clad fighter is. Also dispel and I lose all of that defense really quick. What do you mean by that? Or rather, what difference are you talking about? So Murin says, like the difference between you and Longshaft, he's more of a ranged behind the scenes. Bard doesn't have the spell. It's really tragic. I'm gonna say this to you, Zero, and then I'll go back to what Murin said. Zero bards are already overpowered enough. They need to get the nerf hammer. So I see you a lot more in the fray. He tends to range. So, um, Longshaft plays like I play right now. Um, but yeah, I tend to get more in the fray more often. But what you'll also see Murin, excuse me, what you'll also see Murin when I am in the fray is you'll see me push in and disengage a lot. it, I will gauge every threat that comes before me, and if I don't feel like I can easily dispatch it, I will move off and let his focus get on something else before re-engaging from the side. That is unless I'm one of the only ones left on my team. If I have to engage on the front line, that's kind of a different story. But the differences between Longshaft and myself is a really good example of just how adaptable a scout is. Also, Zero said he didn't disagree with me at all, which is good. Bards need to be nerfed. Devontis on Eben Falls Field the other day, he had nothing but shove. It was so annoying. I had to keep killing him. Killing people equals dispel for non-persistent enchantment. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if this is the point you are making, Jace. That's a big reason as to why I don't consider myself a frontline fighter, even when I'm fully buffed up. Is being dead or being dispelled takes away all of my advantage. If you're a barbarian in full armor, all your shit's a trait, so it doesn't go away if you die. Um, my God, he can have his bard Q&A later. He had it already. God damn it! Extraordinary ability. So I'll start by reading the rule of extraordinary. This ability is not magical in nature. It could represent a poison from a vial or using a piece of twine to fix a broken. An ability listed as EX, which is defined as being an enchantment, is an ability in definition is in its ability definition generally behaves as an enchantment but does not count towards the limit of enchantments that may be worn by a player. I know. It's what it says in the book. Clearly these weren't written by people who knew anything about bows. But I'm not gonna get back into V8 rules. I had that argument with Jason. So basically, scouts as a class are designed around the idea of they're not really magical in nature. Everything they do, with the exception of a couple things, they're not really magical in nature. Everything they do is based around what they've crafted or what they create for themselves. So the vast majority of scout abilities are EX, which are awesome because they just go through everything, and it's really good. So you can't really protect against it as much. Let's see here. So, for example, adaptive blessing doesn't count towards your enchantment limit because it's EX, right? Um, Abilities that have extraordinary, they don't require a free hand. So if you're dual wielding, or if you're drawing a bow and you need to cast an ability, you can do kind of like combat caster, yeah. So one thing I was told for a while, it was actually my first like 8 months as a scout because someone called me up and said that I was doing it wrong. So I stopped doing it until I realized that I could do it again. And now what I do is if I have a little rogue go in sub in front of me because I went rushing it, I will draw my bow and aim right at their back and track them with a drawn bow and then just, or going up behind somebody who's in sub with a couple swords in my hands and track them and kill them with no free hand. Also healing. So something that Jace did the other, and I actually realized that you could do this specific thing, but he just came up and stepped on my foot and healed me. Yep. You are a level 6 bar. Congratulations. Yes. Also, EX abilities aren't magic. All of those things. So, um, I guess there's not really a word for it other than extraordinary, but if you think of it as them being a physical ability as opposed to a magical one. So healing isn't so much of I'm casting a spell and there's a green light coming out of my hand that's healing. I'm wrapping a bandage around your arm and putting a poultice in the wound, and that's healing it. Tracking is I'm not magically pulling you out of your insubstantial state. I'm watching your footsteps go into the dirt, and I'm tracking you and your movement that way, and then pointing out where you are to everybody else. Yeah. Tracking doesn't give a shit about your or EX doesn't give a shit about your traits and enchantments. It's why adaptive blessing has to be self, because if it wasn't, you could adaptive blessing a barbar and it would be broken. Language that I swear. Barbars should not have enchantments. Yay! I'm really glad you feel like you learned something actually. I haven't Amtgarded in a while, so and I wasn't planning on doing this until last week, so I was like, I have no fucking clue. Oh, I did. I have no freaking clue what I'm gonna say. Can it be like a rated PG-13 movie where I get one F bomb before it's rated R? That's my one. Okay. Jeez. So, um, we've been going for what, an hour and a half. I don't know how long these things usually go, but what questions do people have? What other questions? I think we have someone just joining, so I'm gonna give them a chance to go back and look over some. If y'all would stop spamming chat. Oh, if the others went 90 minutes, I gotta wait at least another. Best times to use release. Yes. Just gonna go with yes. This does not work how you think it does. If you need a friend and a friend is frozen, use release. If you're entangled and you want to not be entangled anymore, use release. If you don't care about the current state that you're in, don't waste it. It's much like every other scout ability. While you can uh, while you can charge it, which makes it more of a kind of use it as you see fit ability. You don't want to be just sitting there charging shit all the time. That's allowed in PG-13 movies, by the way. Um, you don't want to be just sitting there charging stuff all the time. So, like, use it kind of sparingly, but really you can use it more often than most of the other stuff. Best way to stop a scout. Kill spell. Another scout is a good answer as well. Um, what do I die most often to? Is kill spell. The other thing with a scout is just be relentless with them. Just keep pressing them. Um, unless they're really armored up and you don't have a way to mitigate whatever armor or enchantment they have, just keep pressing on them. And eventually they run out of answers. It's probably the biggest weakness of the scout, and why I was talking about not being able to charge your really important abilities earlier is that it does create the biggest Achilles heel. Yeah, I'll agree. I'll agree 100%. Teamwork is greater than the lonely scout. I have had teams that I have mopped the floor with because they let themselves get strung out, and I was able to engage them one after another after another. I've had other teams of just a couple people that press in and surround me, and there's nothing I can do to that because I've used my in subs or I've used this or I've used that, and I don't have an answer for both of them. I only have an answer for one of them. So teamwork is very important. Got a couple people typing. So explain to us how to specifically neutralize you on the battlefield. Just me? Give me have me running for more than like 20 feet is a really good way to neutralize me. Um, joking, joking aside, um, the best way to neutralize me field is, I guess, pressing. Like I said before, pressing the attack, especially if all I've got is a bow and no enchantments. As you're moving in on me, um, stop that first arrow and then just press. And more often than not, if you can keep up with me, you're gonna take. Scouts can use longs. Is there any place for longs in a scout's arsenal? That's a really loaded question because longs. It depends on what point of view you're looking at that question from. A stick jock will tell you that there's no point in long. Well, most stick jocks will tell you that there's no point in longs anyway because they end up being too heavy and you can't move them quickly. Um, I actually have found a few uses for longs that I really like. I actually use them more often than not. I use them as down spears, where I will hold them over my legs and use them to protect my legs from sweeping attacks while either by itself and punch blocking any high shot, or I'll use it while holding a sword and give myself a good defense up and down that I can occasionally stab out with. I don't. I used to use a long in the main in the my main hand and a shorter in my left, but more often than not now, if I use a long sword, it's down and it's in defense. What, in your opinion, separates a good scout from a paragon scout? I think what separates a good scout from a paragon scout is the same thing that separates a good any class from a paragon in that class, and that is the ability and the willingness to teach and improve upon the next generation. Yeah, silver on the sash is the obvious one, um, but it's the ability to teach and empower the next generation, and the drive and willingness. I've gotten in trouble. I've gotten in trouble for this with my own knight a couple times for saying that, but when you put the hubris aside for a second, scouthood is it has a lot of the same standards in Amtgard that knighthood has, just in a very, very focused and less critical way. So, like I said before, teaching new players that are up and coming, um, holding yourself on the field to a more honorable standard than the average player, holding yourself as an Amtgarder to your class and to your persona, and it's really how you interact with other people. Now, as far as the martial side of what constitutes a good Paragon Scout, the part of it that does have to do specifically with the class, I'd say for me it's adaptability. But again, it really depends on the scout that you ask. So my Paragon, the person who apprenticed me, was Frederick. Sorry, the person who apprenticed me was Frederick. He's one of the other Paragon scouts in the kingdom. His focus with me through my entire learning process under him was about the persona, getting garb together, going out and like learning survival techniques, learning what it means to be a hunter, kind of stuff like that. His final task for me, his final test for me was to I he had me go around at GE last year, and gather certain plants out of the woods, and then he had me track down and find something. And then he had me navigate my way through the forest to figure out where I was going. And then finally, he had me steal something from him, which I did it sooner than he thought I could do it. So I ended up having to steal something else, which was really funny. He was like, I'm gonna have a little foam treasure chest with me at the bar, and I want you to steal it from me." I hit him so fast in the bardic he didn't have time to take it out of his pouch, so I just stole his song notebook. And when I brought it back to him later, I was like, "Yeah, you didn't have the thing out, so I just stole this." And he's like, "I didn't even know that you took that." But so that's what he focused on, with training. I'm a Bow Scout. I'm always going to be drawn towards other Bow Scouts and training them as to how to become better and more proficient in that area. Um, Jace, someday when you eventually get, maybe the fancy stuff on your set, you'll have a different approach to your apprentices and how you train the next generation. Maybe they'll be more focused on martial and fighting and using their enchantments. It all depends on. So for me, adaptability is the mark of a Paragon Scout. Someone who can flow from, if those are the three aspects of being a scout, someone who can flow between two or three of those. Why are you brokenhearted, Soren? I didn't say you weren't gonna get Paragon. Why? I don't like that attitude, to be completely honest, because I disagree. Paragon is an attitude. It's not. It's not anything other than what you make. Jace, did you just hashtag what I said? What? Why? Okay. Well, it's true. Paragon is an attitude. It's not being good with something. I mean, you've got plenty of Paragons. Like, we'll go back to Frederick. Frederick's a decent fighter, but he's by no means the best fighter in the kingdom. He can't use a bow to save his life, but he's a Paragon Scout. Dashing, I've never even heard of him using a bow. All he does is fight, but he's a Paragon. So it's not just about, it's not just about any one thing. So don't think that you can't put yourself into that area. Is he? You're working with him? All right. Miriam, if you and I keep down our respective roads, we're gonna have the entire kingdom arch, and that's what all battle games are gonna be. Just a line of archers against another line of archers. Volley shots for days. Volley shots for. Hey now, we're not gonna get into that. Um, Hardened Shield is nice, but eh. Imbue Shield and Shield of the Chosen are both pretty badass. I don't know if they're the most important thing to give to a scout, though, because they can only use smalls. You can carry 3 shields all you want. You can only just use one of them. The other 2 just don't count as shields. Also, you wouldn't be able to imbue your shield and harden your other shield, because that's 2 enchantments of protection class. That's a big mitigating factor to evolution I didn't talk, is that the 2 enchantments that you decide to take have to be in different schools of protection or different schools of magic. So you can't take 2 protection based enchantments. It has to be a protection and something else. My siege arrows, siege arrows are what should replace sniper. Because sniper is useless. Ah, three. Okay, so he's saying that those are three separate ways to deal with archers. The way I usually deal with archers is just not getting hit and then getting up in their faces or shooting them. I usually just, more often than that, I guess I just shoot because you know archers tend to miss a lot. It's the sad truth about archers in Amtgard or bow users in Amtgard is all the way back to the first topic for the night is arrow construction. Um, a lot of arrows in Amtgard, they're not good. They're not good as far as like flight characteristics are go. So they just go all wonky and crazy, and they can't be held to accuracy. Um, while I don't like gorge arrows, I will say that they're uniformly made. So while they don't go as far, they're very accurate. Um, and that's the reason why Marcus and I build the arrows we build is that they're accurate. They're uniform and accurate. Turgeon builds very good arrows, which are more of the same. But a lot of the homebrew arrows that a lot of people have, um, the biggest complaint, the only actual complaint I have about homebrew arrows is that unfortunately more often than not they're not actually safe for the battlefield. Um, but it's not a complaint, but it's a observation about homebrew arrows is that typically they're not accurate because they're not made uniformly. Good. So I'm gonna open the floor for any more questions. So if anyone else has a question, I'd like to hear it. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to go pretty soon. Yeah, no worries. I haven't done any public speaking in a while, so I apologize for probably sounding kind of nervous, but I really appreciate you guys. I mean, I wasn't really expecting all these people, so I really appreciate you guys coming out and listening. Yeah, anytime, guys. And don't ever be afraid to reach out to me. Just because it's what I'm doing. Good lord. Um, I am gonna be a GE. Definitely gonna be a GE. Um, I am always available, and goes back to the mark of a good paragon. And this isn't said to be arrogant because this goes for any of the paragons in the kingdom. But you can always reach out to me if you have questions about Scout or have anything that you feel like you need to work on and need help with. So don't ever be afraid to reach out and ask me questions. And scouts are best class, also, hands down. And I guess that's all I got. I really appreciate you guys coming out or listening in.